introducing our special guest speakers for tonight. And they're going to talk to you about our rare and threatened species program, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. But Luke Selleck and Erica Peters are like our rare and threatened species, all right? Because they're very special, like our rare and threatened species. Luke is like a Eucalyptus yarraensis, or to his friends, Yarraga. So when you see him out and about after this, you just say, "G'day Yarra," and he'll say hi. Like this plant, Luke has similar characteristics. He's upright, he's strong in terms of his character, and he has a broad canopy. That means when he was at the KS, he spread out over a large range of different things.
But he doesn't drop limbs.
Oh, I don't know. He's dropped a few clangers in his time. And like the Eucalyptus yarraensis, he's hard to find as a volunteer. So a volunteer that is willing to take on a range of very difficult jobs. But when you do find one, it's very rewarding. And like a Eucalyptus yarraensis, Luke is a very rewarding volunteer. And it's also hard to get seed from him as well. But when you do, it's very profitable. So if you see any seed on him, just grab it. And Erica is more like a Canidia prostrata. Again, she's not a common sort of volunteer. We have volunteers who come and go, and Erica's not like that. But when she's planted in the right habitat, volunteers like that can really flourish. So that all of a sudden, you planted it and you don't really notice it, and all of a sudden, you think, oh, there it is over there. There it is as a Thursday volunteer. Oh, there's some more of it as a Saturday person going out and about into the bush. Oh, there it is over there as well as a committee member, and as a nursery on the nursery subcommittee, and she collects seeds, and she's a Garden for Wildlife volunteer. And all of a sudden you realise that this Canidia prostrata has spread everywhere because it's in the right habitat, and that's what Erica's like. And you realise what a great thing these rare and threatened species are, and we just need to see more of them. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome these two very rare and threatened, these two wonderful speakers to the microphone. Come on, Yara.
Thank you very much for inviting Erica and I to do this. It's a great pleasure. One of the difficulties was acknowledging everybody and not leaving people out. So that is, as I go through, we will be mentioning some people, but an apology right at the beginning, and I'll make them as we go along as well for people that it's difficult to fit everybody in, because the program really involves everybody here. If you are planting plants in Knox, if you're involved in the Gardens for Wildlife program, if you're helping with the nursery, even just membership, you are contributing to saving rare and threatened species, and you're part of our program. It initially started from Graham Lorimer, who was commissioned by or to do a report on the state of the environment, and he recommended that councils, or that we could set up a KS or a plant breeding program, a translation seed bank program for threatened species in Knox. So council took that advice, and with the KS we decided to set up that program. It involved the collection of seed and other propagating material from 78 of the most threatened plant species in the area, and it's intended to prevent indigenous flora species from becoming extinct in Knox, as you all know. So according to the international standard Redlist criteria for the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, Graham found that 185 plant species in Knox, or 41% of all Knox surviving indigenous plant species, are critically endangered. Some of these species are threatened statewide. In the other two categories of locally threatened species, that is endangered and vulnerable, there are another 190 plant species, bringing the total proportion of indigenous plant species that are locally threatened to an astonishing 84%. So that's from the Sites of Biological Significance in Knox from Graham Lorimer. Okay. For me, the success of the program has been that it's been integrated into the work of the nursery at many levels, and into the identity of the KS itself. I don't any longer see it as a separate program or a distinct program. It's just part of what the KS does. When I was thinking about preparing this, I looked through some of the history of the KS, and it's probably important to acknowledge that prior to this program commencing in 2010-11, the KS was doing this work. Darren Wallace, who was the president at the time, and Operation Revegetation, were really conscious, and the KS committee has always been very conscious of threatened species in Knox. And one of the documents I found when I was looking at this was from 15 years ago, the 25th anniversary of the KS. And in a little pot of history, they had a list of species that the KS and the nursery at that time had saved from extinction, either through nursery propagation, a bit like the current program, or seed collection. So it's something that the committee, from the beginning, I think, from its very origin, has been continuously aware of. So it's really important to recognise, I think, that it's much more wonderful that this program has come about. It's always been in the gene pool of the KS itself. What's significant about the program, I believe, is that second point, that it had been comparatively ad hoc. So with the advent of this program, it enhances the credibility and the research status of the KS. You're putting it on a scientific basis because of the assistance and the work that Graham did in helping us establish it. In turn, having that kind of more scientific approach lends weight to the KS and its campaigns, its other little campaigns and lobbying efforts. The third aspect, I think, is the relationship with Knox Council, and it's probably worthwhile just particularly mentioning Nadine Gaskell, because she was really instrumental when we were setting up the program. The support she provided and the other members of council and the bush crews provided to the establishment of the program was really fundamental, and they've been a tremendous support through thick and thin, because it hasn't always gone well. It's been difficult. It's all volunteer organisations find from time to time. It's another layer of our relationship, like Gardens for Wildlife, of which Nadine was instrumental as well. And again, many of you are involved in Gardens for Wildlife, and that too is, I think, instrumental part of the identity of the KS and fundamental to the work that the organisation does. That's working now. Okay, so Dr. Lorimer's project management plan for locally threatened species in Knox recommended specific actions to implement Knox Council's resolution to prevent Indigenous flora and fauna species from becoming extinct. So one of those was to initiate a plant breeding and translocation program. So we undertook this program using Lorimer's recommended methodology. We spent quite a bit of time, a lot of effort securing the Caring for Country Community Action Grant in 2010 to establish the project. It couldn't have happened. Graham put in an enormous amount of time and effort to work with us and try to do it on a more scientific basis. We worked on various drafts of the guidelines. Graham held a public meeting in April 2011 to invite participants from the community. In 2011, Graham conducted several workshops for the KS committee, and there was another one for general KS members, people who were interested. We went to Knox and did one for the bush crew and council staff. And again, so I've acknowledged there Nadine Gaskell's work with that. Following that, it was really important that people had done those workshops because it was a condition of our permits that people had done the training with Graves so that we weren't causing damage in our misguided efforts to save plants. Then we had to apply for a series of permits, both because to access both council land and subsequently also the Ferntree Gully, the Dandenong Ranges National Park, the Ferntree Gully section there on Chandler's Hill, really. The components of the program were the applications to conduct the research and then the progress reports. So I did the first one there in 2014 and Erica has been running the program subsequently and she's done the 17 and a sort of a COVID affected version in 2020. It involves getting ongoing land access permissions, Parks Victoria, Knox Council, the National Park and private land too. It involves plant searches, GPS recordings of the data, collecting the seeds and the cuttings. The seed bank is a really vital component. And the idea is that you're trying to maintain or protect the gene pool. If we lose species in the wild, at least you might be able to maintain that biodiversity. If you've got the gene pool, you may be able to reintroduce some of those plants back into the wild, which was always one of our aims, and that is occurring. Of course, it involves propagation of the species, and so many of the people here have worked in the nursery. You are involved in the program. You are propagating threatened species. You are helping us every day. A whole series of people have been involved in both developing and maintaining the database, and we'll thank a few at the end. We're providing plans back into both Knox and the bush crew, who, with their relevant reserves, can nominate a particular plant species that they want to put back into reserves, as well as we make those plans available to other organisations and into the National Park and the public. So both through the gene pool, through the seed bank, through the propagation, hopefully we are saving plants and preventing extinctions. That was the first seed bank. As you know, the nursery's being redeveloped and there is a great flash seed bank being built. This one was done largely by Graham Patterson, who again has been just fundamental in establishing this program, and the support he's made and the construction of that, and indeed the new one, has been phenomenal. At that time, this is from Erica's 2017 report, 2,468 individual containers, 238 species from multiple sites. Graham's report initially listed plant species at 3 levels, 3 priority levels. The top priority being the most endangered. So from priority 1, 49 plants, seeds had been secured from 11, another 27 plants had seeds secured from 15 of those. They found another 9 plants and had got seeds from 4 of those. Another part of the program, the Bullbat Memorial Garden. It should really be Bill and Beth Bat, I reckon. The rare and endangered species garden is a vital component. In time, and it's already producing material, it saves us going into the wild to collect material. If we can propagate our own material from rare and threatened species, and we're not taking from the wild, that would be absolutely wonderful. So there are still collecting the hunters and gatherers are still going out on a Saturday and collecting material, but the more we can propagate from material we grow ourselves, the better. So the display gardens around the nursery and the Build Back Memorial Garden is a vital component of the program too. And again, many of you people are involved in working bees and assisting in the maintenance and the planting in those programs. You are involved in the threatened species program. Why is it so important? Well, if we're going to maintain our biodiversity, increasing the genetic diversity by securing specific provenance plants and exposing them to broader cross-pollination is vital. That's what we can do in that threatened species program in the endangered species garden. So just for example, there are a series of, so again, looking at Graham Lorimer's report, he recommended, just in this case, Banksia marginata, to collect Banksia marginata from different reserves, put plants into that threatened species garden, allow them to cross-pollinate, increase the health and vigour of the gene pool, ultimately propagate from those plants, put them back into reserves. And again, trying to reduce the need to take material from the wild. I'm going to get Erica to go from here. That's basically how it was set up, and the important thing is what it's doing now, and Erica is the one who's really been overseeing that for the last several years.
Thank you, everybody. It's just lovely to be celebrating the nursery and to have everybody here. I don't know that I can go through numbers anymore. One of the things that I discovered coming back to help with this process tonight was that we haven't really taken stock of our successes recently. We've just been so busy doing things. And I think it's really timely that we start to actually record again our successes and failures, and to really look at what's working in the rare and threatened garden. Those numbers, I have to start again because that's 5 years ago. So, and I think too, Luke mentioned Dr. Graham Lorimer's original report. If we think about that, in Knox, 84% of things really threatened. That's 12 plus years ago now. And so looking at all the development that's happened in Knox, it's really timely. And for me, that's just a sign that we need to start looking again and just build, because we're very successful at propagating lots of things at the nursery, but there are also a lot of things that we've lost and a lot of things we can't find and a lot of things we can't propagate still. So that's what's consuming me at the moment. And one of the things when I first started was my realisation of how little I knew, even though, as I'll tell you a bit later in the history slide about me, I've spent all my life in Yarra Ranges or Knox. And as a child, I saw many of the wildflowers and the plants on my way to schools mostly. 2 of those schools are gone now. But along the walks there was so much bush and just so much to see. And, if we don't make an effort to try and conserve them, they're gone. Now, we're doing really well, and my ignorance, even though I'd had that history, Melissa, if you can call up, what I did after doing the report was to do thumbnails in PowerPoint of all of the plants that were listed. And Melissa's just moving through, and it's really interesting that Richard chose Canedia. Can you just stop at Canedia for me? That's number 30.
Looks just like you.
Yeah.
That's you.
That's me. But I was picking out a few of the plants that we're really successful at, and that's one of them, I think. It's beautiful. Can we go to 37, please? Lamandra multiflora is a plant I didn't know. I'd seen lots of lamandras but had no idea what they were. And at the nursery, getting close-ups and having a look at the plant in close detail, you see the wonder of the photos here, that reddish flower and then at the bottom the yellowish one. They're just beautiful. If you see them actually flowering, they're a wonder. Number 39, Melissa, please. This is a tiny little flower that we've had in the nursery, but, you know, again, beautiful. Just something that is like a jewel. As Susan mentioned, what we're dealing with is jewels, really. The next one is the Montia, number 45. Now this people discovered, I think in fact Jamin Walker, who was the propagator and kind of leader at the nursery, he discovered Montia at Kalunga, and they're minute. They're like 2 millimetres or something, and the flowers of them. But you can see the tiny little plant. I'm not sure that we've actually propagated them. I don't know whether we want to. We have. Richard's nodding his head. Very good. Okay, so that one's good. Thank you. 49 is the next one. Now, this Graham Lorimer told me that this Otelia ovalifolia is near Colchester Reserve, and I've been looking for it ever since, and unfortunately I still haven't seen it. So.
It's in the reserve.
Okay, well, I'll have to come with you one day and find it, I think. But that's one that we haven't propagated as far as I know, and that would be lovely if we could, because that's quite a lovely water lily type flower. 137, please. We've been doing a lot of propagating in the nursery of ferns, and the polystocum, the mother shield fern, has been propagated really well, and we've managed to get lots of that out into people's gardens, and you can see why. There's a tiny baby that grows on the end of the fern fronds, and they're just beautiful. Okay, the last one from this large thumbnail selection that I'm picking out for you is the Ritidosperma. It's 143. And this is one of the grasses, and I know this is Graham Lorimer's specialty. A beautiful close-up of the flowering of certain grasses, and unless you actually pay attention, you never see these things. And again, I don't know whether we've propagated this one. We probably have.
Which one is it?
It's
I don't think so.
I think it's hillside.
Hill wallaby grass.
Hill wallaby grass, thank you. No, we haven't done that one. So you can see we're really in need of new blood who have great enthusiasm to champion these plants that need to come to life and live. Okay, so that was my foray into learning. Melissa, you can go back to the normal. Oh, that's me, isn't it? I have to push this thing. Okay, that's me. All right, I've already told you a little about this. When I first came to KES, it was after I retired, and I knew a little bit of KES when it was behind the old Country Gully High School, but finding that it existed and then finding that people were actually propagating local plants was just a joy and a wonder. That really is what prompted me to start coming, and it also, I suppose, is a reason why I've got that history and interest in these plants. The Rare and Threatened Species program is wonderful too, because if we didn't have that, we wouldn't be conserving these plants. And so many of, well, all of us come from overseas, apart from the first Australians, and we bring with us our need to propagate things that have been in the old countries we've come from. And so, you know, for lots of people, not for people here tonight, obviously, but for most of the rest of the population, they don't know about what's local to us. So it's so important. When I first joined Gardens for Wildlife, and they came to visit and inspect my garden, nearly every plant that I had was an introduced plant. And that horrified me, absolutely horrified me, because I'm Australian, you know. So I guess those are the things that really prompted me to get involved. The hunters and gatherers are a wonderful group that go out on a Saturday, and we just go into the bush, and that's where seed and cuttings are collected. Very much keeping in mind what Luke was telling you about caring for the local environment and taking only small amounts that we're allowed to through the permits. As well as the local garden near the nursery, the rare and threatened, we've got two other sites now, one at Ferntree Gully Railway Line, the other one at Baronia Heights, where we're doing a similar thing to gather the genetic pools of plants that we can work with, and also just to restore those environments. I think probably, again, Luke mentioned the connection with all the friends groups, and there's a list on the screen, and those connections involve us swapping information, sometimes swapping plants, and so it really broadens the network very strongly. The last thing is the point I made earlier, the fact that we really need to reassess what we're doing and just make sure that we are doing what we're aiming at, and then we can report in much more detail. Now, the second PowerPoint, thanks Melissa, I just chose, these are probably the ones that are most they're really occupying my thoughts at the moment, because this one lives up near Alamein Track, which is just up in the basin from me, and it's really difficult to propagate. We've gathered seed, but the seed is like the terrestrial orchid seed, it's minute. But it's absolutely beautiful. That blue is true. This is me again. Right. Now this grows in Mr. Lorimer's reserve, and it also grows up the basin of Linda Road, and we haven't propagated that, and I'm not quite sure why, but we need to try.
Very hard.
It is very hard, is it? Okay, well that would be a reason. And growing them, and the need for us to actually, assess our report. I will mention actually, Richard came up with the idea last week that we need to be very thorough in looking for some of the things that are listed in Mr. Lorimer's reports that we haven't found, and so we're talking about having a bit of a blitz on that now too. But I'll leave it there. Thank you.